Welcome back to another episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Bollhorst from Eaton PD in Colorado, 31 years in law enforcement. Really looking forward to having a conversation. So welcome to the show, Chief Bollhorst. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you, Paige.
Of course. No, I'm really looking forward to it. So 31 years is a long time to be in law enforcement. Give us a little bit of background into you.
Well, I worked really hard to get into law enforcement back in the 90s when I knew that's what I wanted to do. Went to college and just had that dream. It just took forever. By the time I graduated and finally got accepted with the Newport News Police Department, it took me about 3 years. And that's with a college degree. So fast forward to today, we're struggling to find good candidates and to get them onboarded. So just looking for what it was when I was getting into where we're at now, looking at the struggles that, the typical first-year officer went through, much different than today. Looking at cell phones, social media, body cameras, everything that law enforcement has evolved in, has changed drastically over the 30 years. And I would say every 5 to 7 years, there's a huge technology advance and probably some protocols and policies that are put in place that are really impactful. So I think that what's resonated over my career is you either have the ability to remain flexible and change with what's needed, or you kind of get left behind and you aren't as adaptive or, quite frankly, as important in the culture of law enforcement. So you just really got to adapt to those changes.
I love that you use that word adaptive, because I was thinking that in the very beginning when you were giving your intro and saying that you had to work really hard to get this position. And I'm really curious, what gave you the maybe perseverance and the resiliency to keep going and to be able to adapt and learn? Because I think that a lot of people, especially when you're young, a lot of people, kind of after the first no, give up and they're like, all right, I guess that's it. Let's hang it up. But for you to say, hey, it took me 3 years and I just kept going because I knew that this was something worthwhile. Is there any advice that you can give in the topic of perseverance and resiliency?
Absolutely. It's the message I've given to my daughters. I got 3 daughters, and I just, when they got out of high school and got into college and looking for a career, it's very important not really for them to look at what mom and dad wanted, but what do they want to do? What are you passionate about, and what makes you happy? Whatever that is, chase it and don't give up on it. The only person that can deny them is themselves. So just stick true to yourself, to your goals and your dreams, and chase it.
Yeah, I like that sentiment of don't ever give up. As long as you are continuing to try to make that forward progress and improve yourself. And like you said, chase it, don't give up. I really like that, because I think it's not the failures that we're defined by. It's how we get back up from that and how we move forward.
Definitely. And just fast forwarding to today, I applied probably to 7 or 8 agencies when I was trying to get in law enforcement. I heard a lot of no's, thank you, but you're one of maybe 800 looking for 10 jobs.
Right.
So fast forward to when I retired at 27 years with Newport News and decided I was going to throw my name in the hat for a chief position. Guess what? Exponentially increase how many no's. And but that's still something that I wanted to do. So I continued on. And it was very disheartening to get told, well, thank you, but no thank you. But again, still just go after it if that's what you want to do. It's out there. The timing, the location, and the team that you get aligned with, it's all got to come together. So it's kind of like magic, finding the right place that you land. And I would even equate that back to your career. Whatever it is you want to do and where you want to do it, be open-minded and realize that if you get it now, it was meant for a reason. The location and that career that is out there for you is going to happen. Yeah. And it's kind of like destiny, more or less. Everything lines up.
I like that. What was your driving why? You know, we talk about why a lot, and, you know, why someone wants to be in this profession. And, you know, there's been advice before from other chiefs that are like, hold tight to that why, because you're going to need it in the hard times. And so what was your driving why?
Just to be a part of a team that functions to give more than we receive, basically. Yeah, just this career, you know, we see so much. We see, and we serve customers, quite frankly, that are in their most volatile stages, you know, whether it's a domestic violence situation or finding a child that's lost and upset, or dealing with an intoxicated individual behind the wheel of a car. You know, it's a horrific situation for them, but we're there to be kind of the stable environment to find a solution for their issue. So whatever bad experience we are involved with somebody, we're there to help and provide a positive outcome. And quite frankly, even if that's arresting somebody, I've had many a conversation with somebody that I've arrested where I may bump into them a couple of years later and they thank me. So it's treating people with dignity, respect, and not focusing on the negative aspect, but what can we learn from that and what is ahead of us, what decisions can we make that are more productive in the future. Yeah. And I've had a lot of experience with some folks with that, and it's a very rewarding field. But I'll tell you, after 31 years, my why is simply to be a part of effective, positive change within an organization and to motivate and inspire others along that same pathway. I'm not in this for anything for myself, other than I enjoy what I'm doing, and I can't imagine doing anything else.
Thank you. You know, and you kind of mentioned this earlier about how different things were when you started, and you've had now a really long and successful career. But to your point, you know, you guys see a lot and you go through a lot, and it's not if, it's when, and it's how severe. And I'm curious how this career has impacted you over the years, physically and mentally, and how has that helped to develop the leader that you are today?
We are a product of our environment. There's no doubt about that. And going through the leadership classes, the ongoing argument was always, are leaders created at birth, or are they educated? And everybody always has or leans towards one side or the other. And I think there's a little bit of both involved in that. But the experiences that create and form us develop that leadership within us. And I think without having some negative aspects of the job that do touch us, but don't allow it to just disassemble who we are. Just remember humanity and humility exists in everyone, and just try to focus on that for a positive outcome and that leadership component. Even, I tell brand new officers as a chief, hey, day one, you're a leader. You may not realize that, but when you get out on a scene or an event, you're the uniform, you're the one out there that's got to take charge. So remember that. Remember all the skills and information you learned in the academy and that you developed with the officers that trained you. But you might be the leader. You're out there, you're it. So focus on that and dive deep into your own personal experiences and be who you need to be at that moment.
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that, because I think that sometimes we forget the power that we have within ourselves to make a positive impact or to influence other people and to empower everyone within the organization and saying, hey, you are a leader. Regardless of what role you have within the organization, you have that ability to impact people's lives in a positive way and to influence people. And I'm curious, are there certain, because I do like that topic and that question of, are leaders born or are they developed? And I only have my personal experience, with this, but I do think that the older I get, the more skills I have, just in general, but even, as far as, leadership or confidence and the way that you stand and the way you present yourself and your knowledge base, I think grows as you get older. But I do think that you can lay that foundation at a young age, and then you just get older and wiser, right? As you grow. But what are some of those qualities of a leader that you try to instill in your team?
Even in police work period, the strong characteristics we look for, and obviously integrity. That goes without saying. Yeah. That that's got to be utmost importance. You've always got to do the right thing and imagine, and when I was brand new, they said, what if your grandmother's watching? What would you do and how would you act? So that was a huge thing in my generation. Now it's like, what do you do when you don't think anybody's looking, but the camera's always on because we have to wear the body cameras? So it's just, doing the right thing at the right time, no matter what. And again, the human aspect comes in. But, if you make a mistake of the mind or the mistake of the heart, those are two separate things. We got to make some critical decisions quickly. You've got to think and act. But if you make a mistake, that's okay, as long as you don't cross that line of a mistake of the heart where it's an integrity issue. But that's key. Having a good, strong moral character is in line with that. Having the ability to adapt, change, think, problem solve. A lot of those skill sets can be developed throughout life. It doesn't even really need to have the college experience or the education, but just dealing with problem sets as a young adult. There's a lot of different jobs that I've had that have given me those skill sets: waiting tables, customer service, knowing how to think on the fly and correct issues. That's probably one of the key things I went back to when I was in field training, learning how to be a police officer. Not really the college experience; it certainly helped. But how did I deal with people when I used to wait tables for years? It was just trying to appease people when they were upset with whatever happened in the kitchen or wherever else. But, those are some of the smaller things. The big piece, though, is having self-awareness, emotional knowledge, and the fortitude to understand your emotions are going to come into play. Don't give in to them. Understand what's going to happen, but don't make decisions based off emotions, but rather what is needed at the moment. What's proper? How do you handle that situation? How do you solve it? Try to brush your emotions to the side and not make a quick, hasty decision.
Yeah. And I really commend you guys, because everything that you said it sounds easy, but it's not, right? It's like saying, hey, make a quick, effective decision, but don't make it out of emotion, make it out of logic. Make sure that you're operating in this way and you're making the right decisions. And this all happens like that, and so I really appreciate you explaining that. I think that, everyone who's listening is, for the most part in law enforcement, so understands that, but it takes an immense amount of emotional regulation to be able to do that. How can you regulate your nervous system in those intense times to be able to have effective decision making, to be able to have a clear head and make the best decision that you possibly can? I know you mentioned this a little bit earlier too, about how things have evolved over time and how technology looks different now. And I'm really curious. I've heard a couple different opinions on this, but do you think that because everything is recorded now, do you think that helps to build confidence, or do you think that that instills more like hesitation and fear in making the wrong decision?
Well, I'm smiling and kind of chuckling because you would think that when we turn our cameras on as a police officer, we are going to behave a certain way, knowing that we're recording ourselves. I've seen that backfire, and you've seen I've seen personally some really horrific events happen out of the mouths of the officers who record themselves. But that aspect alone, I had mixed emotions in the early 2000s when the body-worn camera system came into play. It was back and forth. You were either pro or against, and I didn't see the need for it, quite frankly, because, with any profession, there's usually a few rotten apples in there, but we had a way and a method to sort those out. Why should everybody have to pay the price and the huge bill associated with having a bad body-worn camera system? But I did find value in it as I went through the ranks and understood that, it actually provides us protection with frivolous allegations. And again, 99% of the time, somewhere in there, we are doing the right thing. So it documents and reports that fact as well. And there's a few incidents where we've got the poor actors. It uncovers that as well. And hopefully they're able to sort out and be taken out of the profession, because we don't need those bad players involved in this profession. It gives everybody one bad actor in law enforcement affects all of us across the nation. So it does help with that.
And I think that, quite honestly, you're the only profession that happens. You never see that anywhere else, where you have, an actor who does something really bad, or an NFL player who does something really bad. And you see these things, these different people within different communities or different professions, and no one ever says, well, they're all bad. Never do you see an NFL player does something and they're like, well, all NFL players are bad. I think that law enforcement is kind of the only profession where that happens, unfortunately. And so I think that, we've had this conversation before. It takes a split second to kind of lose that trust within the community, but it takes so much effort and time to build it up. And so I appreciate your insights on that. I know that you had shared with me offline that you have experienced, throughout your career, individuals who you've known who have died by suicide. I know you experienced a line of duty death, and you had mentioned one statement that I thought was really powerful, and this in the context of wellness. You said that you didn't know how to handle that. Can you give a little bit of more insight in what you meant by you didn't know how to handle that, and maybe retrospectively how you would handle that now today in the context of wellness?
Yeah, putting those pieces together whenever you're having or handling something to that level, that's the worst case scenario, and God forbid anybody should have to experience losing somebody that they're close with or work with. And in law enforcement, you could be 1,000-person department or 10-person department. You're still a family, you're tight, you rely on each other, there's a relationship there that is family, even though it's outside of home, that we all belong to one another. Even if we don't like each other, we've got each other's backs, professionally. So anything that happens internally where, God forbid, you lose one of your members, it's like losing a family member. And it can be cataclysmic if you haven't prepared, planned for, and understand how organizationally and individually you're going to deal with that. Because you mentioned it, it's not if, but when. And unfortunately, it happens. And in law enforcement, in most larger agencies, I think the data shows that about every 5 years, there's an officer killed in line of duty in most agencies with 300 officers or more. And when I was in Newport News, we didn't have that happen for 26 years. And with over 450 sworn officers, we never expected it would happen again, but it did. And you never know when it's going to happen. And when it does, does everybody know how to handle that, how to deal with it, and how to work through it? Because everybody needs a support system all the way from the chief down to the best friend of the officer that was involved and the family members. So really focusing on those high risk, low frequency issues are paramount, especially in law enforcement. And that's a good example of it. We hadn't talked about it. We haven't even speculated that we should visit that policy, but when it happened, we realized the importance of it. I remember when seeing one of the captains showed up with the policy, saying, "Oh my God, we've got to deal with this. This is what we have. This is what we should be doing." And we really focused on that, and we're able to get through it because we had that. But it was a very strong and critical learning lesson to realize, I know it's one of those things you don't want to look at, but you've got to plan. You got to plan for the worst so that, God forbid, it does happen. You know how to function and work through it and help those officers that need the help and have everything in place.
Yeah. Do you think that because you experienced that firsthand, that has been kind of your driving force now with the agency that you're currently in? I know that you did a lot of work through, wellness with your previous agency, but do you think that was kind of that catalyst or that driving force for the conversations and the resources that you're implementing in wellness today?
It was definitely impactful with who I am, especially as a chief. I'm still evolving. I've only been a chief for going on 4 years, so I'm still learning a lot. But that is very impactful. And even reflecting back through my career and things that I experienced with others, that why did we do that? Why didn't we ask for help? Why didn't we reach out? We all had supervisors. Why didn't I inform a supervisor that this was happening? Because back in my day, again, the 90s, you just worked through it. You weren't supposed to say, "Hey, I've got some issues. I need some help." Today, I think it's more open-minded and more realistic that, hey, we're all human. We're not expected to go through these and go through it alone. We create networks, we create opportunities and solutions for our employees, especially in law enforcement, public safety, firefighters, EMS, anybody that sees the worst of the worst, it impacts us. So we've got to make sure that we're there with a safety net to help those that need it.
Yeah. You had said to me offline that law enforcement's really bad at taking care of themselves. Why do you think that is?
I'm just going to say that I think we're so busy taking care of everybody else, we forget about ourselves. We just, it's I've got to be out there. I've got to do this. Everything is so fast paced. It's either slow, like I said, in the hyper vigilant state of law enforcement. You're either going, parked in a parking lot, trying to eat something, probably out of a fast food window that's not too healthy for you, and then all of a sudden, you get a call and you got to throw yourself on the floor and get there. And so now you're running 100 miles an hour into a fight. And then when that's done, we do the paperwork, and it's the same thing all over. We just don't know how long of a gap between the last incident and the next one. But we lose track of what's important for us. When I got into law enforcement, I weighed 204 pounds. And then after 6-7 years, I got up to 248, which is the heaviest I'd ever been. And I realized as a detective in narcotics, working late hours, getting maybe 4 or 5 hours of sleep, 2 days off, generally working an overtime shift just to make some extra money. And I was not taking care of myself. I had a lot of issues, and I was young. I was in my mid-30s at that point, but I realized, something's got to change. So I, went into a physical fitness routine, got involved with the group, and really got in the best shape of my life in my mid-30s, so it can't happen. Again, just setting that goal and sticking to it. And I'll tell you, I've gained a little more weight now. I'm 20 more years older, but I'm learning it doesn't come off as easily. But I'm still focused on staying active, working out, and eating a lot healthier than I probably ever have. But you got to keep sight of what's important and look after yourself, because if you don't look after yourself, you're not going to be in a good position to help anybody.
Yeah. Well, thank you for calling me young, first and foremost. So thank you. You're like mid-30s is young. I'll take that all day long, even though it doesn't feel that way. But I agree with you on the importance of proactive wellness. And I always have like little sayings. And one of the sayings I really like is that it's easier to stay fit than it is to get fit. Right. And it doesn't mean that you can't backtrack. Of course you can. And I think that if you have fallen off a little bit and you feel like you haven't been taking care of yourself in the way that you should be or would like to, you can start today. But I think that for the younger generation to have that conversation of like, hey, like coming out of the academy, like you might be in really good physical shape. How can we maintain that throughout your career? Because it doesn't get easier when you get older. You get tighter, things don't fall off. The pounds don't fall off as easy as they used to. And so how can we put in place that proactive wellness? And to your point, I think it's almost like reverse psychology a little bit. I do think that and I'm guilty of this too, where I want to show up for everyone around me to my own detriment. Right. And like, especially with you guys, you are so busy taking care of everyone else that you forget to take care of yourself. But then, like you said, if you don't take care of yourself, you can't show up for everyone in the best way that you want to, or that you should, whether that's professionally or personally. And so I think it's getting that message out there. It's like, hey, do you want to show up for your family and be the best dad, the best husband, the best wife, the best mom? Do you want to show up in your community and do the best job ever? And, make sure that you're helping people in the best possible way that you can. Well, in order to do that, you have to be good. You have to be good physically, mentally. And I think that it's almost like this reverse logistics that people like don't understand until maybe you're, later in your life and you're like, oh, now I got to do it. So I agree with you that proactive wellness is important, but also like you can't show up and be the best version of yourself if you're not taking care of yourself.
Yeah. I kind of keep a model of the importance, and I know religion is out there at some level for everybody, but really I put self, family, and then your profession. And that's kind of the flow of, you got to put yourself first. You can't be there for your family. And you definitely, if you're a family and you are not in a good place, you're not going to do anything for your profession, and specifically in law enforcement, because if you've got issues at home, you're not going to come to work with your head screwed on straight, and you're more susceptible to making a bad decision, which could be detrimental to yourself or somebody else. So it's huge.
100%. What are some of the things that you're doing organizationally? I know that you shared some things with me offline about how you really wanted to create a program and resources that kind of goes beyond EAP. And I know that you said that you're constantly having conversations about wellness and what that looks like. So I would love if you could share with our listeners some of the things that you have done and some of the successes that you've had.
Yeah, starting out when coming in from Newport News, and they had a great program put in place. They had a crisis intervention stress management team that were made up of your peers that you work with. Mm-hmm. And if you had an issue, you could go to them without any repercussion, as long as there weren't any of those legal reporting parameters. But you could go have an open conversation with those folks. And we had them embedded in the police department, the fire department, and you knew who they were. You could go talk with them. And on top of that, we had other programs. But that was key, to be able to have an outlet just to speak with somebody, regardless of what the problem was. So when I became the chief and realized there were a lot more platforms coming on board for wellness, specifically within public safety and police. And again, talking about the EAP, yeah, that's out there. It's great to say you have it. But again, police are kind of bizarre creatures. We think everybody's out to get us. And if I go to EAP, the chief is going to know, the city manager is going to know, they're going to label me as whatever. And that's going to be held against me for the rest of my career. That's not the case. Right. But if we can provide an outlet for them to go and have services for whatever they need and realize, no, it's not being tracked. The only thing that's important really for me is that it's being used. We're onboarding that now, and that it's a phone app that every employee, their family, and the retirees get. And they have services to everything from financial assistance, relationship issues. Kids can use it if they're in school, college, they're being bullied. They have access to that app as well. Anything that an officer deals with that he or she wants to talk to somebody, they get direct peer support. They can choose who they talk to. It can be texting, a phone call, or just daily check-ins, or however they want to establish it. But the list is huge with whatever assistance they need. I think they have a physical fitness assistance on there. They have some coaching components, meal planning, and the list goes on. But we're just onboarding that system, and we hope to roll that out very soon.
I really like that you talked about the power of conversation, just having the awareness about this and having those conversations about the importance of it. I think that the more we can talk about this and the more normal it becomes. And then maybe there isn't, in the future, maybe if we fast forward, another 10 years, that there won't be that fear that the agency is out to get you and that they're tracking everything. And that, if you do reach out to someone that, Big Brother's listening, and, this is something that everyone is struggling with across the country. We have these conversations a lot about building trust and confidentiality and making sure that it's not a taboo subject. It's something that is completely normalized and completely confidential and completely normal as a human to the things that you had shared with me earlier and that we talked about on the podcast. The things that you see in your career should bother you. It should feel like that wasn't quote unquote normal. Obviously there's more normalcy to it because these are things that you guys see all the time. But if you witness a child death and then you have fear of talking about something because you feel like you shouldn't have a reaction to that, I think those things are starting to go away. I think that the conversation is now how can we give you resources so that if and when you do experience this thing, we got you. Here's a resource that you can reach out to right now. And not only are we encouraging it, we're using it too, and it's just something that's so normal. And so I appreciate you talking about some of the things that you guys are doing to try to maybe raise the bar of what wellness looks like, and then having those proactive and reactive measures in place for your team. You had told me that you forced people to take advantage of some of the things, or to take care of themselves. And I thought that was really funny because we have this kind of debate between, should wellness be mandated or should it be voluntary? And when we were talking on the phone, you're like, I forced people to take care of themselves. And then they thank me later. What did that look like as a leader, telling someone you got to do it?
Well, the context with that, there was a disciplinary procedure happening, but it's very obvious there were some trauma involved with that employee that they weren't dealing with. They refused to deal with. That was right there. And, the whole goal of anything, even with a disciplinary matter, is for corrective action to make that employee whole again and to be a productive member of the organization. So with that specific employee that I know I'm referencing, I had to set him aside and say, look, for your good, for your future, you've got to understand what triggered you to do what you did. So I'm going to send you to go get evaluated with this. Please be open and honest and work through it. And that's only going to help you come back to us whole. And went through several sessions and came back and opened up and said, I never realized why I was doing what I did. I just thought I had anger issues or whatever. But they worked through the trauma that existed and really became a better employee for the organization and a better person, I think, too, because they carried that along for several years and probably didn't realize how it manifested because they didn't deal with it. Now that they had the outlet to, granted, it was kind of forced on them, but at least they could have closed off and said nothing and probably not been employed very long, but they chose to have that conversation, open up and heal. And you talked about the things we see. I talk about scar tissue. We all we have wounds, we see things, we've gone through things, and we get wounded. These scars are always going to be there. We're going to carry that tissue with us. And sometimes, it's painful. We remember it through that scar tissue, but it helps us to remember not to make those same. If we made a decision that forced that critical injury on us, not to do that again, what can I do to avoid it? But also reminds us of the healthy wounds that we carry that, I earned this. And here's what I've learned. Share that with others, and hopefully they don't have to go through the same thing we did with it. But there's, we all carry some type of trauma with us, whether it's personal, professional, or other. We're all affected. Humans go through that. It's just part of the evolution of life. But it's like, how do we create a positive environment off of our experiences?
What I find to be really interesting, and I have done this personally, I've seen it happen around me. We've had conversations about this, but I think you're exactly right. Like, none of us are going to get to the end of this life without some wound or scar or trauma. Like, none of us are unscathed at the end of this life. There's always going to be things. And there are a lot of public safety professionals who enter into the career with childhood trauma already, and then you're piling on 20, 30 years of cumulative trauma, throughout your career, but then also extra stuff that happens in your life. And one of the things, I had a lot of childhood trauma in my life that I shoved down and postured up, and that manifested in my life very negatively. So that story you told me, like, I could really deeply relate to that. But I judged everybody around me. I became so hardened and angry, but I also was so judgmental. And I've seen this happen, around me too, where we go through things in our life and then we look at everyone else and say, well, what do you know about me? What do you know about what I've been through? You haven't been through what I've been through. And instead of recognizing exactly what you just said of like, we may not have gone through these same exact things, but we've all been through something that's deeply impacted us. And I think the more we can have that empathy and understanding for each other instead of judgment, and it's like almost like trying to one up each other on our trauma and the things that we've gone through, then the more healing I think that we can all start to have, because it almost becomes like this pressure where you don't want to share the things that you've been through because you're afraid that someone is going to think that it was not as significant as what they went through. It's almost like this diminishing attitude behind it. And so I really appreciate you talking about that, because I think that if we can understand that in each other, that we've all been through stuff and we're all going to need the resources to be able to offload those things so that it doesn't manifest itself in these negative ways, and we can have that longevity that everybody is looking for. everyone wants to get to the end of this life and feel good. No one wants to get to the end of a 30-year career and not be able to enjoy their family or their free time that they've worked so hard for. I want to live on a cruise ship. Like I want to party my way out of this thing. I've said this before, but I want to speed walk to the end. Like I don't want to be like rolled, to the end of this thing. And so I think there's a lot of pressure and judgment when it comes to the things that we've gone through. And I think if we can start to have a little bit more empathy for each other, then we can start to heal more.
It'd be great if the whole world could subscribe to that.
I know, right? Well, maybe it's not the whole world. One of the things that, and I'm sure you've heard this too, where they say like, you might not be able to change the world, but you can change someone's world. And I think that, through this platform, my hope is that some of these conversations resonate. Maybe there's one thing that, impacts somebody somewhere, and that helps to improve their world. And it's not the whole world, but it's an improvement, just a little bit better every day.
Yeah, and that's funny you mentioned that, because it just popped in my head. I used to do a lot of things in the schools when I was an officer. And some of the kids would always ask me, why did you want to be a police officer? Kind of like, what is your why? Mm-hmm. But back then, granted, I was in my 20s, upper 20s. But I was like, well, what's important to me is, I know I can't save everybody, but if I can impact or have positive influence on one person, then I feel that I've done something or accomplished something. So that is true. And if you've ever heard that starfish story where the kid's walking the beach and sees like 100,000 starfish washed up on the beach, picks up one and throws it back in. And then old man says, son, what'd you just do that for? He goes, all these starfish out here, you can't hope that you're going to help them all. He goes, no, I know I can't help them all, but that one that I just threw back in probably appreciates it.
Yeah.
So that really resonates.
I've never heard that starfish story, excuse me, and I like that a lot. And what I find to be really interesting is that I think we all share that same testament, right? It's like when I got into this career path of being in the wellness space, like that was my ultimate goal, was to help people. And I've said that too, like if I can help one person to be able to offload some of these things, or one person to improve their life, and then you do help somebody, and then it's like that bar raises and you almost forget that the whole point was the power of one, and then we're so hard on ourselves because we're like, well, we didn't impact as many lives as maybe we wanted to, but then we forget where we came from and why we started, and that it is just one at a time. How can you remember that feeling, of how great would that be if you could just help one person, and then you help 1,000 people and somehow it's not good enough, So I think, remembering kind of that feeling of you are good enough, you are making an impact. And to your point, you're not going to be able to help everyone always. But you do have the power to impact people's lives, one at a time.
Yeah, another piece, I think we set the bar high for ourselves. If we were just to think much simpler, and if we think we helped one person, in fact, we probably helped 5 or 6 through that one person, because they went and probably shared the message or some piece of the assistance they got through us with others. So there is always that too. Yeah.
Oh, I really like that too. And, one of the things, and I can draw from my personal experience, my dad was a drug addict, and when he got clean, it didn't just impact him. The people that helped him to get there, that impacted me, and then that gave me the understanding that like rehabilitation is possible, and that, it gave me empathy and it gave me passion for wellness. And now I'm helping other people. So I think it is this cascading, almost like domino effect that, if you're helping one person, they have a family and you're improving that family unit. And then maybe you're improving the life of someone who then wants to also improve other people's lives. And so, yeah, I think we forget the ripple effect that happens from our actions. Both good and bad, by the way. What advice, I have two kind of final questions for you, and then I'll let you take the floor if I missed anything. But what advice would you say to someone who says either, because these are the excuses I hear, either I don't have time to take care of myself or I don't need it?
Well, if they don't need it, good for them. I hope they can go out and run 3 miles and not breathe as heavy as I do. They're not in pain, but we can all improve on everything and anything. I think it's said that a true wise person knows what he knows not. That's how wisdom is achieved. So if you ever think that you're at the plateau, I can't become any better, they're only lying to themselves. So never set the bar where you're going to achieve it. Always keep pushing yourself for that. I'm going to trim that 10 seconds off my mile. I'm going to do whatever. Always do better. It's been said in a book, try to improve 1% daily. Sometimes you're going to have setbacks, but that's okay if you have 1 or 2 because you're going to make up for it. But always try to find a way to do better tomorrow than you did today. So, looking at your career, your personal state of being, always look for something that can be improved on.
Yeah. I was just having this conversation earlier because I agree with you. I think that there's never a finished product. And I was having a conversation and this gentleman was talking about how we're like clay. He was using this analogy of clay and how we're never thrown in the kiln in a finished product until maybe we die. Right. And then that's it. But, or whatever it is that you believe happens after that. But the concept was we're forever evolving and, you're always molding yourself into this different version. And maybe you have this idea of what that finished product looks like, what that perfect final thing is. And then you get there and you're like, oh, well, maybe it looks different now, or maybe I could adjust this or do this. And so this idea that we should always be evolving and trying to strive to be better. And there isn't ever perfection. And even when you are at the top of your game, how can you still have self-assessment? How can you still improve yourself? Because I think it's a mistake for us to be all right, I did it perfectly. I've arrived, because as soon as you say I've arrived, you're falling behind, because the people underneath of you who understand that there's still more to give and more to grow, those are the people that are going to be passing you up. Right. So you should always be incrementally trying to make yourself better. And it doesn't have to be big strides. I like that you said that. It could be 10 seconds off of this, or, how can we, maybe take an extra second before responding to something, or how can we, maybe have a better nighttime routine so we can sleep better. Just simple things of trying to improve ourselves a little bit every day. I like that a lot. But he did this analogy of clay that I thought was really cool. I've never heard that before. And it really is that same concept of how can we forever be evolving and improving ourselves over time.
Yeah. Good sense right there,
Yeah, it's not me. I can't take credit for that. I just take what other smart people say, and I just regurgitate it. Probably not as good as he did either. But my final question for you is for the younger generation. What words of wisdom would you share with someone who's earlier in their career? If you could go back and talk to your younger self with all the knowledge and wisdom that you have now, what would you share with them? Maybe something that you wish you would have known, or something that's helped you along the way.
During my career, I was a late bloomer to go for promotion or to make change within the organization. My wife pushed me because I'd come home fussing and griping about, cops hate the way things are, but they hate change even more. I'd come home belly aching about whatever's happening, and she would say, well, you could get promoted and be part of that change. And I was like, I don't want that headache. But I had some really good mentors that challenged me and said, you've got so many experiences and so much knowledge on how to improve things. Why don't you take the sergeant test? And I was like, oh, I don't want that headache. I don't have to be responsible. I don't want to have to learn new things. Wow. Yeah, I reflected on that and said, what am I doing? I enjoy where I'm at, but what if I did? What else am I going to learn? What else is out there for me? So I would challenge everybody that's new in their career, law enforcement or wherever, don't become complacent. Don't just stay in that status quo. Challenge yourself. Look for other opportunities to grow. Reach out of your comfort zone. Strive for something that is within your reach but different, and get that experience under your belt. It's going to make you a better, more well-rounded person. And in your profession, don't ever say, I don't want to go there because whatever. Actually go there, experience it, so you can learn what that side of the arena is about. Because one day you may become a chief. I never thought I'd be a chief, but here I am. And if I didn't accept different duty assignments, I wouldn't have the knowledge or skill sets. Really, I'm not saying I'm the best chief. I'm still learning, but I've been in enough places and assignments that I've got a good ground on what's needed, and to build a team that can put those components together that I know I'm missing. So become a well-rounded individual, reach outside your comfort zone, and don't stay stagnant. Stagnicity it's just a horrible place to be. Think of it as a swamp. You don't want to live in a swamp. It's stinky, nasty, bad things live there, alligators, snakes, etc. Get out of that swamp and don't be stagnant.
Thank you. Great words of wisdom. I appreciate your time so much. And I kind of want to give you the floor if there's anything I missed, anything that you want to add to the conversation. But I really do appreciate your time and coming on here today.
Well, anybody that's out there not in law enforcement yet that is looking to become a police officer, it's a great career field. I encourage you, but please, 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 just don't watch TV. Go out and do a ride along. Get with your local agency, ride with a police officer, and have open, honest conversations with them. What I have seen throughout my career, we'll hire somebody on paper through the academy. They're amazing. But then they put the uniform on, get the equipment on, go out there, handle for some calls for service, and realize this is not for me. And they've sacrificed a lot. And, it's tough to have to come up to that realization, but learn that early. Make sure you know what you're getting into, because this job is not for everyone, and that's okay. There's other aspects in law enforcement, if that's still your desire. But being a police officer especially, it's not for everybody. But make sure you have the intestinal fortitude to decide that for yourself and make that decision. But get out there, experience it, talk with officers, and see it and feel it, know what it's like before you venture into it.
Thank you. I appreciate your time so much. And thank you to everyone who is listening, and we'll see you again next time.
All right. Thank you.